Over the course of my life, there have been a lot of people that I thought were my best friends. Maybe more than just thought. Like, for a time, these people really were, in their own way, my best friends. And even though they were all different, they all, unfortunately, ended the same, with me on the outside looking in, promises broken like old spaghetti. But as I got older, I met new people through camp, youth group, but it was in these spaces where I felt like I could show up as authentically as possible. But these places were also temporary. At the end of the summer or the weekend, we'd all have to go back to our own homes. These friendships didn't end, but the distance made it a lot harder. Little did I know that a common side effect, so to say, of borderline personality disorder is that personal relationships are extremely hard to maintain.
Hi, my name is Isabel Mata, and I am a writer and mental health advocate who is passionate about helping young people live their best lives, no matter where they are at on their mental health journey. As a bisexual Jewish Gemini from Rochester, New York, I let mental illness invisibly rule the first 23 years of my life. But after hitting rock bottom just a year after graduating from NYU, I finally realized that if I truly wanted to be happy, I had to do the work. With a mix of medication, mindfulness, and dialectical behavioral therapy, I somehow managed to not just live, but thrive with my mental illness. And now I want to pay it forward. Meditation, spirituality, hustle culture, sex, and love are all topics we discuss here, along with a bunch of tangible skills that can help you be your best self, even if your brain chemicals are all out of whack. This is Being Yourself Loudly.
Welcome to this episode of Being Yourself Loudly. I'm your host, Isabel, and I am joined today by a very, very special guest, my great friend, Michelle. We met at NYU, and that was a couple of years ago, and here we are.
Great to be here.
Now, before we get started in talking about this big thing called friendship, I wanted to firstly just talk about how finding quality friends is very difficult, and it's very hard. That being said, I am so grateful that you are my friend and that we get to have this conversation. And I was looking through my memory box because a lot of the things that I write for this podcast are reflections based on my past. So I tend to look at old journals and things like that. And although I couldn't find the journal that I was looking for, I did find this birthday card.
Oh my God.
That
you still have this?
Of course I still have it, that you made for me for my 18th birthday. Or not my 18th birthday, my 21st birthday. It says, "You're legal," and it's a picture of me that you somehow fucking made with like paper mache. And like,
oh my God.
It's just like the most beautiful thing in the entire world.
Trip down memory lane, all those recycled materials, because when in college you can't afford a $7 Hallmark card every
I
birthday.
know. Well, it was way worth it because this was the most meaningful birthday card that I think I ever got.
Wow.
Especially when it came to friendships. So I think before we get in, I just want to tell you a little bit about my experience with friendships. So I mentioned a little bit in the beginning that I've had a lot of trouble keeping friends. And a lot of it had to do with this theme of being left out. Since I was little, I was very easily triggered whenever someone would have a party or a gathering at lunch, like anything where I didn't get an invite. I would take it very, very personally. And that usually ended up with a blow-up fight where I would basically like come at this person being like, "Why didn't you invite me to this? Why don't you like me? Why am I not your friend? Like, do you not think that I'm as good as all of these other girls?" It took me a long time to find quality friends and to come to a place where I feel like I do have friends, and you're one of them. So I guess my first question, like, getting into this is, as an adult, we're both adults, kind of, mostly.
Trying
to be. What does adult friendship mean to you?
That's a big question. And I'll start this off by saying I'm so appreciative that we get to have this conversation together. In our drive over here, we were all chatting together with Isabel and her husband, Richard, about how just friendships in general are relationships that we need in our lives, absolutely, but lack so much vocabulary around. And so as we go through today's conversation, I'm excited to just put words to feelings. It will probably be messy. I'll probably get things wrong, but the fact that we're even trying is exciting to me. When it comes to friendships for me as an adult, I would say these are my lifelines, right? Like I have moved so many times in my life. We might get into that later. I'm now living in San Francisco, which is a 19th city I've called home. I've had a lot of opportunities to start anew, and I would say, frankly, and maybe uniquely, friendships when it's not convenient.
That's so hard because a lot of times the people, especially when you move, I feel like you meet people wherever you go. And then just because you leave, then what? Like, does that friendship end? Do you continue it? Do you have to talk to them all the time? Like, how do you nurture a friendship? Like,
right. And so I think that's a conversation that I've had to have in a very active way throughout my life. More so, I'd say something that all of us can relate to is how the pandemic has shifted our ease of access to meeting new people and what it means to specifically invest in friendships, especially when, the friendship ties are a little bit weaker or younger, as you will. And, figuring out who do I want to befriend when they're, at least for a big period of time, was a really big concern about health, right? Like, are you someone I want to run the risk for?
Would I die for
Would
you?
I die for you? Or are you someone that I would feel comfortable getting sick from at the end of the day? Would it be worth it?
Yeah.
Spending time with you for a happy hour or whatever, eating dinner at your place inside the confines of a closed building, right? Those types of questions are very new, but I think they're important questions because it touches at this idea of intentionality, right? Like, what does it mean to be intentional about our relationships, as opposed to, okay, these are my work friends, I guess I'll be friends with you guys. Okay, you're my neighbors, I guess I'll be friends with you guys. And just kind of working with what is most immediately around you, and instead choosing to, for lack of a better word, maybe identify your tribe, invest in your own tribe, right?
That reminds me of like orientation friends.
Yes.
I feel like anytime you start something new, whether it's college or camp or something, there are always people that like within that first week, you kind of cling to. I remember when I first moved to London for my freshman year, we all got there and the first like 3 weeks are just purely orientation. And people are just like what, I don't even know what the word is. Everybody's trying to grasp onto friends and to find your people. But if I look back, the people that I became friends with during orientation are not people that I was friends with even like probably 2 months later, because it's this whole idea of people feeling like they need to have somebody, but then you actually sit down to hang out and you're like, I don't have anything in common with this person. It's not intentional in a way that long-term friendships usually are, or at least hopefully maybe should be.
Yeah, I hear that. And I definitely remember that at NYU as well. There was like this dogpiling effect almost of like, okay, I have to make friends with people as soon as possible. Or even like just like this pairing phenomenon of like, okay, if I don't walk away with at least 2 people paired on my shoulders, I'm going to, go these next 4 years alone.
Yeah.
And there was that, scarcity mindset almost for friendships. But I think as I get older, something I am more and more comfortable with is this idea that you can be friends with people for a period of time and let each other go when the, friendship no longer serves you. And that's okay. You don't have to be friends with people forever in order for that friendship to be meaningful.
I was going to say the same thing, 100%. No, I think that's so important. I don't know where I heard this, but it was like, as you go through different phases of your life, there are friendships for different phases of your life. And those friendships can be really meaningful and really important during that particular phase. But eventually, you move on. And maybe that friendship is no longer what it used to be. And instead of like grasping onto it and holding on to it because you think you have to, sometimes the best thing to do is let it go. But that can be really hard to actually notice that. And I feel like a lot of adults struggle with that as they kind of hold on to their childhood friendships or their friendships from high school or from college or just from all of these different places of their lives. They feel like they have to maintain these relationships even though maybe at the end of the day they don't have anything in common anymore. And it's not serving them.
Yeah, I would say, again, maybe unique to my perspective from moving a lot. I think I've almost had the opposite issue where it's like, okay, what does it mean for me to stay with friends through the stickier parts, right? Just because I've been so accustomed to leaving almost every year of my life.
Yeah.
And so naturally when you move, it becomes really easy to just fall out of touch and not have those direct conversations about, why this friendship isn't working or what I'm struggling with, or maybe, renegotiating your vows, so to speak, in your friendship. Like I haven't needed to do that very much because I'm just not there anymore. And so, time zones change, social media changes, we just fall out of touch. But now as an adult, I think, having those more intentional conversations, to talk about what you need in the same way that you would with a partner or, you know, a teammate at work or something like that. You know, those conversations matter. And I think we need to bring those up in friendships more often.
Well, that's a good pivot because we had the conversation like that.
We did.
We did.
We absolutely did.
So I'm going to give some context. We were friends during the period of my life where I was transitioning from a long-term relationship with my college boyfriend to a not-so-healthy relationship where I found myself in a very sticky situation and I was not making good choices. And you were my friend during it. Just tell me from your perspective, just tell me about that experience because it might get a little uncomfortable because we're talking about something that was really hard for both of us because we weren't friends for a little bit. Or I think we were, but maybe we needed some space. So I just want to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny talking about it now because I feel so close to you and I feel like we can talk about anything now. And so it's almost like weird to look back on that because it feels so distant.
But you did something really amazing that no one else has ever done for me, which was that having that conversation where you said, you told me what no one else has told me, which is like, when I hang with you, like I feel drained after. And I remember that because I never want to make someone feel that way. It wasn't the last time that I heard that, and it certainly maybe wasn't the first time that I really heard it, but it was the first time where it got to me in a way of I needed to look at my own actions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you told me that, and you said, I care a lot about you. This friendship is so meaningful to me, but with everything that you're going through, at least from my memory, like, you didn't leave our interactions feeling good.
Yeah. I remember we would talk a lot about what was going on with your partner at the time. And I remember feeling like, I want to help you. You're texting me for advice. You're texting me for comfort. And there was just kind of this light switch moment for me where I was like, all right, I'm doing everything I possibly can for you. I'm showing up in every possible way, be it physically, be it, you know, over the phone, sharing resources, like sharing my personal experience, whatever it was. And I just felt like you were stuck in a way that I could no longer contribute to.
No, I had to get myself out of that one.
And so there was this really tough moment for me where I felt like I was spending time with you and I was leaving hostile.
Yeah.
And neither of us were benefiting from that meetup anymore.
No.
And so I sent you a text message where I said, with as much love as I possibly could, I think we need some space.
Yeah.
I think you're going through some things that I cannot support or be there for you in the best way possible for. And it wasn't a forever thing.
No, clearly.
It clearly was not a forever thing. And I'm so
emotional.
glad. I know for those that are listening, Isabel's teary-eyed and it makes me teary-eyed too.
But it's important. It's important because that conversation, I feel like, was such a huge step to what we were just talking about intentionality and friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me space to reflect on the relationships that I have in my life. And if I'm pushing people away by my actions, then this was something I had to deal with on my own.
There's a common saying that living in New York City will either make you or break you, and it all comes down to one thing: your hustle. But as someone who has lived in the concrete jungle for more than 5 years, I can definitely tell you that making it in New York has a downside: burnout. For those that love the urban lifestyle, but not the stress, exhaustion, and struggle that comes with it, I am so excited to introduce you to Slow City Living, a new podcast by my fellow bisexual queen, Stasia Datskovska. Offering a look into how city dwellers find balance amidst a hectic, fast-paced environment, Slow City Living gives us a fresh perspective that flips the rise and grind straight on its head. Check out SCL for yourself on all platforms and see how you can incorporate slow living into your own lifestyle. I know I am.
Boundaries are very new to me. But I think they come with having these meaningful relationships and these connections. So that leads me to the next question of, what do you do when you do have these check-ins and that friendship is no longer serving you? And it's time to end it. And it's time to move on. like, how do you manage a friend breakup? Because I feel like I've heard so many times that friendship breakups are so much harder to deal with than romantic breakups.
Sure.
And I'm not sure why.
Like I said, I've had some experiences where I've quote unquote broken up with a friend before. And I've also experienced being ghosted and doing the ghosting. So full gamut. I will say I have struggled the most when it comes to not having a conversation about it. Because I think you leave so much unsaid on the table. And like you mentioned with your rumination, how you kind of, went down your own track of what are all the things I've done poorly in this relationship? Is it this? Is this a final straw? That's really, really dangerous. And if you don't have a conversation to close it out, you're going to do that. And then she's probably going to do that too, right? At some point or another, there's just this unsaid, I don't know, stress. I've had that too, right? I mean, one of the relationships I'm thinking about right now is I had a roommate. Actually, funny story. I had 2 roommates. We all lived together, all 3 of us. One of us had a quiet falling out where we just mutually ghosted one another, in effect.
Which I actually love that. I mean, I think that's awesome. I've had a couple of those where like it just kind of simmered out.
Yeah.
And there was no big dramatic thing. And honestly, it was okay. But I always think about, why did the friendship end?
You just don't know.
And you don't know.
You just don't know. I mean, so I think it is actually easier to have these tough conversations because it shows you care, first and foremost. It gives a person closure, and it gives you the opportunity to hear, what have you done wrong and what can you work on and how can you grow?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's tricky because I'll share an experience. So my junior or senior year at NYU, one of these years, I met a friend. Ultimately, this friendship ended, and I'd let this person in over and over again, and I'd continue to be hurt, and I'd be sad and disappointed and just really freaking sad because this was a person that I really cared about, but they weren't doing what they needed to do to take care of themselves, and it ultimately ended up hurting me. Similar to the conversation that we had, like this person was draining me for all that I had. And finally, for the last time, I let this person back in. I set very clear boundaries, and they crossed them again. And for the final time, I had to make a decision. So ultimately, what I decided to do was to take myself out of the equation. And it was hard. It was like mourning a relationship because, you think someone's going to be in your life forever, that you're going to grow old, that you're going to, raise your kids together, and then suddenly they're not respecting your boundaries, and you have to do something about it. So that kind of comes to the question of, like, what do you do when the friendship has to end? And I think ultimately you have to protect yourself, and you need to do what's best for you, and you have to do it in a way that is respectful and that is kind and compassionate.
I think something I want to make really, really clear in this conversation is that when it comes to opening the door back up to people in our lives, we have to make sure that we ourselves are safe.
Yes. Yes.
And when our safety is compromised, we can't offer a good relationship in the first place, right? And if you feel like your safety is compromised, my God, take the space, all the space that you need, and don't look back.
Absolutely.
When that boundary has already been crossed, I don't know that you owe it to the person to have a conversation, right? You need to take care of you.
Absolutely.
So to just make that really, really clear, I want to say that.
That leads me to the next question of, how do you find quality friends? Especially in a pandemic. And not even especially during a pandemic, just how do you make friends as an adult?
Yeah.
So for you, you moved to San Francisco. You recently moved apartments. Like, how do you make friends?
Like I said, had the chance to move a fair bit in my life, both, domestically and internationally. So time zones can be a bitch.
Yeah.
Right. And when it comes to choosing friendships, something that I have to be really honest with myself about is bandwidth and being really thoughtful about who I'm choosing to offer that bandwidth to. And so
your energy is sacred.
It is sacred and it is finite. And so when I feel like I am spending time engaging in relationships, not just friendships, any relationship in which, I am not energized by the end of it, I need to be really honest about, is this a temporal thing or is this a relationship drift, right? Yeah. In which maybe we're no longer serving ourselves. And so
how do you recognize that? How do you answer that question?
I think a lot of it, I honestly think a lot of it is just really being in tune with how my body physiologically is responding while I'm hanging out with someone and after I'm hanging out with someone. And even when I'm about to go and see that person, like, do I feel anxiety? Do I feel a tightness in my chest? Is my body relaxed when I'm sitting with them? Am I overthinking my answers? Do I feel heard? Is that person checking in with me? Or are they just talking about what's going on in their own lives? I cannot tell you how many freaking friendships I've had where they just talk about what's going on with themselves. And then, there's no space for me to really share what's going on with my life. And we end that conversation and they're like, gosh, it's so good to see you. I'm so happy we caught up. Good to, whatever, have this conversation. And I'm left there thinking, do you know what's going on with my life? And sometimes that's a me thing, right? Sometimes it's me not interjecting enough or me not bringing up enough topics to let that person know, like, hey, this is something I want to talk to you about, or this is something I want to share with you. Sometimes it's me just being quiet and waiting for an invitation to kind of, step up with what's going on in my life. And sometimes those invitations don't come explicitly. It's not to say that person doesn't want to know what's going on. But, I've had a lot of friendships, quote unquote friendships, where it's very one-sided. And so I think checking in with my body and asking myself, like, am I excited to see this person? When I leave, do I feel excited to text them back, right? And like catch up about our topics? Oftentimes, we'll talk about podcasts, books, movies, whatever. And I know that for me, a really good sign of a friendship or even a date, frankly, right, is like when I get back, am I excited to continue the conversation again and again?
So there is a certain level of mindfulness that comes from these relationships. And maybe it has to do with the fact that you and I are both like regular meditators, and mindfulness is a large part of our life, but that's just another part of the reason why I think that it would help so many people to be more mindful and to be more in tune with their body and themselves, to know how they are feeling, because then when you do have these kinds of interactions, you're able to tell if something is off and to go from there.
I would say so. I think the other part of it is, at least for me, and I would say every person is going to have their own, again, needs out of what they want for friendships. For me, I love to feel inspired, and I love to feel like my friends are pushing me to grow. And so that to me is something that I'm very intentional about and speak about often with my friends, where I'm like, hey, I need you to give me feedback on this, right? Like real talk, like, how is this essay? Or how did I handle this relationship? And I want people to serve it to me straight, right? That to me is what a good mark of a friendship is. I know sometimes I have friends that don't necessarily want that from me, right? Maybe they just want a listening ear. Maybe they want a companion for a party, right? Like maybe we're just social friends. Maybe we're not deep friends.
So and that's okay too. There are different kinds of relationships for different things.
But I think we need to talk about it, right? We need to talk about it with each other.
I think I was watching Brene Brown's new Netflix show, Atlas of the Heart, and she said something that really stuck with me, which is like, as humans, we are made to connect, but we are not able to connect with others in the way that is meaningful and healthy unless we are first able to connect with ourselves.
I believe that. I fully believe that.
100%. And that takes time, and it takes getting uncomfortable and getting to know yourself and being okay maybe being a little lonely.
Yeah.
So that you know what you are looking for in friends,
right,
and not just going out looking for the first friend that you can find to cling on to.
While I rejected exercise for the majority of my short life, I have come to terms with the fact that when I get a workout in at least 3 times a week, I feel so much better. And I have Pure Barre Washington to thank for that. With a focus on low-impact, small movements that strengthen and tone your entire body in 50 minutes or less, Pure Barre is a total body bar workout that transforms you physically and mentally. Luckily for all you listeners, Pure Barre Washington, with locations in Green Lake and University, is giving you 20% off your first month of an unlimited membership. Just use the code BULOUDLY. And remember, your first class is always free. See you on the mat.
To your point about how do you make friends as an adult, I think something that's really interesting to me is that maybe from moving so often, I don't know, I really like meeting people, and I think I start off on the footing of every person I meet is a friend until they've told me or given me a reason to not think we're friends, or has given me a reason to not trust them or not invest in them. because that person has maybe values that misalign with my own, because maybe that person has hurt other people in a way that shows me, patterns wise, not something I want to go down, not a path I want to go down. And so I think for me, it's like I enter meeting new people with just general openness until given a reason not to be open. The other thing I think is, as I've moved or I've gone through big transitions in my life, I think I've often attracted other people who are going through big change in theirs, right? To your point about, welcome week at university, I think everyone is in this novel space of big change. And so people are especially open to this idea of introducing more people or new people into their lives. Sometimes I move to places and I meet people where they have their crew. They're not looking for new friendships. And that's okay, right? Me trying to break into that circle is just gonna feel like a dead end because they will always have a protected bond between one another that they don't need, fillers for. Mm-hmm. They're good. And so for me, as an adult, it's like when I'm going through big change, I'm oftentimes seeking out maybe people who are also going through that change and can hold space for that type of unknown with me. Some of those friendships work out really well. Sometimes we go really, really deep. Sometimes those friends are people where we just kind of stay in touch over social media and, that's kind of the end of it. But I would say more often than not, I've befriended people who have recently gone through a breakup, who've recently moved into the city. That's a huge one. Other people who are new. Or just more so finding people who feel like they need to let go of some of their past relationships and are looking for some novelty. And so this friendship can maybe offer that, right? But it's more often than not, I should say, someone who is looking for change as well.
You mentioned something that we do not talk about enough, which is value alignment, or rather value misalignment. That was something that I learned about recently. I've been doing coaching for my freelance business, and we talked a lot about like what are my values personally, what are my values for my business, so, like what are the values that I'm looking for in other people. And that was new to me, that you could think about these things. And even when it came to me and Richard's relationships and getting ready to be married, we were working with our officiant, who also happens to be like my mindfulness mentor, and she had us talk about what are our values as individuals and what are our values as couples. And I think that is so important to bring to friendships. Because if you don't, then you guys aren't aligned in the same thing. Maybe someone's a big partier and you're not. I've had that issues before where I've had a lot of friends who just wanted to go out and drink and party and like get blacked out, and I just I didn't want that. How could we possibly deepen our relationship if we didn't even like spending time in the same way?
Yeah.
So when it comes to values, how do you figure out what your values are? Because again, we're not taught this.
I think you're edging at an underlying question, which is, can you make deep friendships without having a friendship with yourself first?
Yes, honestly.
Right? It's like so often, and again, it's not just friendships, it can be romantic relationships too, but sometimes we're looking for people to tell us who we are.
Yeah.
And when you're out there kind of like blindly feeling around the walls to figure out where things feel nice, right? It can be really, really messy. But I think if you really do sit down, and sometimes it takes time, right? And it can be challenging, but if you actually sit down and ask yourself, what do I care about? Or what is the type of person that I want to be in the next couple of years? Or, what types of values am I trying to, invest in, right? Like those conversations make finding friends so much easier.
Absolutely, because you already know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
And you're not going to go somewhere that doesn't align with that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I learned through this coaching and through this experience that I care a lot about loyalty, someone who's not going to talk shit about you behind your back, someone who's just going to be there and be a good friend and protect you. I also learned that I really appreciate people who are ambitious and driven and goal-oriented. And that's something that I look for in friends, because there is nothing worse than being friends with someone or even in a relationship with someone and them just kind of being stagnant. Apathetic. And especially if that's not who I am, then I want someone who's going to push me to accomplish my goals. And I also want to help someone else accomplish their goals and reach their potential. But these weren't things that I wouldn't have known unless I looked inward and I asked these kinds of questions. What about for you? What are some of the values that you look for in friends?
Gosh, I definitely think I'm interested in people who are curious.
Yes, curiosity is like my number one value.
It's
100%.
huge. It's so huge. I want people to be excited about life with me. And I've really struggled to maintain friendships, and to a fault have probably, kept too many friendships in my life where I felt like those people just aren't really interested in learning or changing. They're kind of set in their ways. And I used to think if we're not having a good conversation, it's because I somehow am missing something to show up for them. Truth is, we don't have what one another needs.
Yeah.
Again, misalignment, right? I want to talk about new topics. I love talking about ideas. I don't like talking about other people, right? Gossip, like those types of things. Or to not talk about the news. That's something that's really important to me. A small story, and this is kind of not necessarily about friendship, but something that has definitely impacted how I think about how I show up in the world. Was in my first job, I had a boss pull me aside. And this is first job out of college, like the first job out of college. I studied politics in school and then worked in finance for a year. And I had a boss separate me. She was one of the only females on the floor that I worked on. And she said, Michelle, I need you to talk about more boobs and less books. And I said, excuse me? And what she said is that I often heard you speak on the floor about what's going on in your intellectual life, right? You talking about what's going on in the news, you talking about the latest book that you've read, and let's be real, this is a floor in which people don't want to hear that. We want to talk about parties, we want to talk about socializing, we want to talk about things that are not so charged. And so her advice to me to do well in this space was to, in essence, be less myself. And that was a really confusing thing for me. I was, 3 or 4 months into my new job. I didn't know what it meant to work in a financial or professional space for that matter. And so it was really tough for me to sit with that and feel that tension was certainly against my values. But I didn't know if there was something wrong with me and I had to adapt or what that was about. And so, fast forward, I did not stay in that job for very long. It was a very toxic environment, and I'm very happy I left when I did. That conversation sticks with me though, because it really was a direct confrontation to what do you care about, and are you going to spend the time talking about what you care about or choosing to fit in? It's the same for friendships, right? It's like I can choose to participate in a conversation where I am disinterested, but pleasing people around me, right?
But
to talk
that's
about.
no fun.
It's not fun.
It's
not
not fun.
And so I love seeking relationships where people are curious. They want to talk about the books they're interested in, the news topics they're curious about, whatever. I also think optimism is really important for me.
Me too. And I had no idea until I spent more time with people who were pessimistic that just how draining it is. Too pessimist, that's fine, but I'm an optimistic person. You're an optimistic person. Like, it makes good energy.
It's good energy, exactly.
That's so important.
And I understand that sometimes our friends are going to go through bouts where, it's tough to find the silver lining. I get it. And we can absolutely hold space for that. But in regular patterns, that's tough. That's really, really tough. And so for me, in general, I do seek people that, I don't know, feel a joy or excitement for life.
Yeah. And I think with that, I'll say that it's okay if that means that maybe you only have 1 or 2 really, really close friends. And I think that was something that I'm learning now as an adult, that I'd rather be surrounded by quality over quantity. I used to think that if I didn't have, X 10 people wishing me happy birthday, then I was a failure, that I had no friends. But the reality is I'd so much rather have a couple really close, beautiful, meaningful friendships than be surrounded by a bunch of ones that just feel empty.
Just don't hit the right notes.
Just don't hit the right notes.
Yeah, I get that. The other thing I think for me is that I'm looking for someone who can also hold space for my type of attention.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I think what we've talked about so far is like, what do I need? What are the types of relationships that feed me? The other thing for me is I like to go deep. I like to ask deeper questions.
Yes. That's one of my favorite things about you that I love is I think introspective is the word I'm looking for, where you ask really great questions and you make every conversation intentional. And it's not just, we're not just talking about fillers. Like, we're not just talking about the weather. And like, while yes, we'll talk about the news, like it's asking meaningful questions that comes with it. That make such meaningful friendships.
That's huge for me.
Yeah.
And I definitely
You model it, though. You model it very, very well, which makes me
Appreciate
want
that.
to be that kind of friend as well. Because you create that environment where it is safe to ask these questions and to get deep, even if it's stuff that maybe is uncomfortable with anybody else.
I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, of course.
It's made me feel insecure at times, for sure, because I have pushed on people's boundaries at times by asking questions too quickly,
Yeah.
or maybe at inopportune moments where people didn't feel safe to answer those questions. And so I hear that. That said, I know that when it comes to close friendships and the types that I want to hold space for, you know, when people are willing to accept that I'm interested in those deeper parts and are willing to go there with me, that's the type of friendship that I want to seek out and continually show up for. So that's huge for me. And when I know that I'm pushing up against someone's boundaries in that way, when I ask those questions, maybe it's not the type of friendship that I really want.
No, because you want to be able to go deep and you want to be able to have something that's more surface level. And that's where intentions come in. So I think the biggest thing that we can take away maybe from this conversation is the importance of values in friendships and making friendships that are intentional. Even if the intentions are different depending on the friends, having friendships with intention is monumental, I think.
Yeah. And then I think another big takeaway is just thinking about setting boundaries in a loving way.
Yes, boundaries are
Right.
not, people are so terrified of boundaries because they think that by setting the boundary, that says that someone else is doing something wrong or that they don't want you. Like, for me, boundaries was always really scary because I took it very personal. If someone set a
Sure.
boundary with me,
Sure.
that meant I did something wrong and that it was my fault. But now I know that in order to have these meaningful connections, boundaries are the things that protect you in a way that nothing else does. So, especially when it comes to vulnerability and opening up, and most times when you want to have a meaningful friendship, you do kind of have to be vulnerable. You have to open yourself up and step out of your comfort zone because that's how relationships grow and flourish. But with that vulnerability comes the need to protect yourself, and in doing so, honoring yourself and honoring the person that you are friends with.
Sure. Absolutely. I think it says, I care about you in this way, and I won't let you hurt me in this way.
Yeah, I
And
care
don't
about you
want
and I care about me.
Exactly. I wouldn't let you hurt yourself in this way, and I won't let you hurt me in this way either.
Yeah.
So I think there's a way to do so compassionately.
Yeah.
And I think
Using your I statements is one of them.
Yeah.
I feel this when you
Sure.
do this, or
Sure.
I didn't know that, so maybe that will help other people out there. I think before we end, I think this is a good opportunity for us, like you and me, sitting here to talk about like our intentions for our friendship, because I don't think we've done that,
I don't think we have.
and I think it's a good opportunity to do that. And it's a little uncomfortable. It's a little like emotional. I'm like getting teary eyed because it's like I feel very mature. But I think it's important to lead by example and to show maybe what these conversations look like.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're comfortable.
Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it.
Okay. I don't know where to start.
Gosh. Well, the question goes back to you then. What do you search for in friendships, or what do you want out of this friendship with you and me?
I love this. So what I love most about our relationship is that no matter how long has gone by, how much time has passed, we can get together and we can pick up where we left off. And we can have meaningful conversation and just share our hobbies and our interests and just talk and have a meaningful relationship in that way. And
Yes.
I feel like you're definitely the person for me where we can have these kinds of emotional, in-depth conversations. You're also you're very supportive. You're a very big champion of others, which is incredibly important to me because I want to feel like I've got a team, like I've got people on my side.
Yes.
Even when I'm feeling down, or like someone to just be like, you are doing amazing, you got this, like you are killing it. So
Yeah.
I like that we're able to celebrate our wins with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's really big for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And you've had so many wins. Let's be clear. I don't know if you've, had the chance to really dive into this in your podcast yet, or if you're going to, but I hope you do, because the last 2 years have been monumental in you choosing to show up for yourself.
Thank you.
It's really cool that I can just call you on a whim's notice. I think when I visited you in Huntington last time, I think I messaged you with like a 2 days heads up.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I'm in Joshua Tree. You're kind of close, right? 2.5 hours. Should I pop by? Yes. Stay on my couch.
I mean, girl, you called me like, I want to say like 4 days ago, and we're like, I'm coming to Seattle. Like, we're going to do this. Like,
yes.
And I was like, hell yeah, stay on my couch. And now you're staying on my couch. So like, I will always have that space. And I love friends that I can do that with too, because honestly, I don't know if I have many that I do that with though. I think it may just be you. But I know that if I go to San Francisco,
you have a couch.
I have a couch.
You have a bed.
I have a bed. And
absolutely. Yeah.
I can only hope that other people find friendships as meaningful as we do. And hopefully this conversation helps people look at their friendships and look at their life, look at their values, and be more intentional with it.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and be sure to tune in to a new episode every 2 weeks on Sunday. This podcast is free to listen to and available in any app that supports podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate and review wherever you are listening. Don't forget to take your meds.